paper that were required. However, the majority of that paper was all scheduled so that they would understand what the equipment was in the facility and the background. So we don't get that complaint on a regular basis. We've just issued another request for a proposal, and a local bidder was awarded the contract, and they're a very small operation, and we're able to navigate the request for proposal process just fine. Staff make themselves available in the purchasing area to answer any questions that bidders may have, or if there's any confusion or misunderstanding on what they need to fill out. They can reach out not to the issuing division, but certainly to us in corporate support services and purchasing in particular to provide some clarification for them. So we're here to assist them. We want to ensure that we get competitive bids, and the more bidders, the better it is for the county.
Okay, so would that person be Karen?
Through the chair, no, not necessarily Karen, but we do have a purchasing email, and we have a general extension 2549 that they can reach a member of our team to help them navigate that process.
Okay, well, I do know some of the staff there, and Karen and yourself, and I know that you're very helpful, so I appreciate that. Thank you.
Councillor Brunton, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm through you to Shelley. I go back to somewhat what Councillor Oliver spoke about, and that is a two-envelope system. I too think that whatever is brought forward, we should be able to see it, and I guess that question's been answered. But take it a little bit step further. I recall when I asked this question a few years back, it's the composition of the committee that deals with those, I guess we'll call it the first envelope, where you rate things with points. Who decides who's on that committee? I mean, it seems to be, if you get 4 or 5 bids and the people that have been appointed to deal with that, how do they know the companies?
Through the chair, the evaluation committee members are disclosed in the bid document when it goes out for bidding. We disclose it by position. One of the checks and balances that we have with an issuing division and in corporate support services is we ensure that there is the technical knowledge on an evaluation committee. There's some representation from procurement. We make sure that the committee is balanced, so we have a well-rounded group. Committee members are required to evaluate individually, and then the committee comes together for a consensus evaluation. Generally speaking, we try to facilitate most of those RFP evaluation meetings, and so we have a well-rounded, well-informed group, and our evaluation is based on the information that's submitted by the bidder and in accordance to the criteria and the weighting of that criteria that's disclosed in the bid document.
So you don't feel there's any loss in the bidding process by the people that might be on that committee then? You think it's served its purpose in the past?
Through the chair, I believe that we have well-rounded evaluation committees. I think that they're doing good work. We ask committee members to disclose any conflicts of interest so that they don't sit on evaluation committees where a perceived conflict may exist. And I think that as part of a manager signing off on a request for proposal and corporate support services doing our due diligence before it's issued, I think that we have a good quality of evaluation committee members that are participating.
Okay, my second question is, I read somewhere, and I don't know the details, but the Construction Lien Act's going to change, and it's good or bad?
Through the chair, I'm going to put Karen on the spot, and I'm going to ask Karen to maybe make some preliminary comments. It's one of the areas that's on our list of tasks that we've been monitoring and been attending and getting some information from our colleagues about. So Karen, if you don't mind.
Through the chair to council, yes, the Construction Lien Act is going through a review right now, and we are waiting for that to be released. It talks about prompt payment to subcontractors by the contractor and a 28-day requirement time frame. So we will be monitoring that closely and looking at the changes and bringing them forward in the new policy.
Okay. And my last one is, I'm not sure how you work it, but when it comes to bonding, and I know more about how it works in road and sewer work, but when you do buildings, or I guess buildings, and we're going to possibly be getting into some of that with a hub maybe, or something in the nature of a hub, I guess, we'll use those words, but who determines, and I'm going to go back to, and I asked this question way back, and it happened on Norview, what happened with the performance bond, and I never got an answer. I remember asking why we would have ever released that bond way back, and nobody answered that question. So I'm kind of wondering, like, does each department head deal with their bonding issues? I know labor, materials and all that, that's pretty straightforward, maintenance, but when it comes to performance, sometimes somebody's got to say, hey, hold it, we're not, we're going to put them on notice.
Through the chair, that's a very good question. Respectfully, I think what we've identified, that we have some departments that look after bonding and performance security on a regular basis and are very knowledgeable and have a good handle on that. As we sort of unpeel the orange, we see that there are some deficiencies in other areas, and that's sort of the move towards centralized purchasing so that we have individuals working that have that expertise on performance security and bonding as well. So it's a work in progress, certainly. But I'll ask Karen again to speak to sort of our requirements around performance security and bonding, and perhaps even Ms. Robinson wants to chime in because she's one of the largest areas that looks after bonding and performance security. But I'll ask Karen to start.
Through the chair to council, there are different types of bonding requirements that there can be with procurements, performance, labors, and material bonds as well. And the amount of the bonding requirements are determined by the manager of the issuing division. They are kept for the duration of the works being completed and released upon successful completion. And certainly Ms. Robinson is her department is a frequent user of bonding, and if you wanted to add some comments to that as well.
Yeah, I don't think I need that right now. I'm more concerned with some of the building stuff we've done, like, and we've run into problems, and I wonder if we're going to have a better handle on that. Mainly performance bonds, that's where I'm looking at. I know how the material bonds and all that works. So.
Through the chair, I can confirm, Councillor Brunton, that when we move towards centralized procurement, as we move towards it, there'll be a much more collective adherence to those requirements.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I have no other speakers. What are your wishes? Councillor Black?
The recommendation in the report?
Seconder? Mayor Luke? All those in favor? That is carried. I see we have 5 more reports to do, not to mention other business. I think it's time for a break. Come back at 20 after 7. Thank you. Oh. Get a good stretch? Yes. A long night. Oh, we started at 1 o'clock.
I know. Not like a normal class.
It's a whole day.
It is.
Yeah,
It's a whole day.
working day.
It is. Thanks, Bill.
Staff report DCS 17-87, 2018 municipal grants. I believe we are on page 221. Mr. Baird, please.
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. I'll be brief. This is an annual report that we do about this time every year. And before you is the list of the 2018 municipal grant applications that have been received up until October 1st of this year. That's the cutoff for consideration in the 2018 budget. There was some discussion a few weeks back when the minutes from the Tourism and Economic Development Advisory Board came before council. So here's the report that we can maybe get down, answer a little bit more of the questions you might have. So just at a high level, this is an annual program. There's $1 per capita that's set aside in the mayor and council's grants to others budget. So that amounts to about $62,000. The Tourism Active Advisory Board has a grant review team that goes through each of the applications and makes sure that they meet the test, all the requirements under the Municipal Act. And if I could get you to turn to page 224, is a table. It shows the 2018 proposed recipients. This is all up to council, but this is a recommendation to you. The first 6 that you see on that list are what we call grandparented. They are included in your policy. So these groups do not have to make annual application. They automatically receive funding in the amount that's shown. First one being high school bursaries. There are 5 high schools, and each school gets $500 that is awarded to a student that is going into civics, medicine, or the trades. After those grandparented list, that starts off at the Simcoe Little Theater, you'll see the list that goes down. There's 15 or 16 that were submitted, and each of these groups has made a request for funding everywhere from $500 to $25,000, which is a considerable amount. The committee has made a recommendation of the amount, knowing quite well that council does entertain other requests over the rest of the year. You may recall you get deputations for fees being waived for community hall rentals and ice rentals and the like. So for 2018, this is included in your base budget already. There's a list that totals $52,000 that's being recommended. You do have $62,000 in your budget next year, and that would leave you with $10,000 unallocated that you could use as you see fit. Each of the applications have gone through a warrant process and have been scored. The score is there just to basically provide that validation that they met the test. So I'd be glad to answer any questions, and that's the report.
Councillor Black is up first.
Just wondering, through you, Mr. Chairman, to Chris, part of the criteria for funding, yes, there's a number of items there in the policy. And I'm looking at number 4, cannot be agencies whose mandate is the responsibility of other levels of government where funding has been withdrawn. I'm just wondering if the CAMHS would fall into that category or not for $3,000.
Based upon the committee's review, Mr. Chairman, they did meet the test. They may receive funding from other levels, but they have not been cut off. They still receive considerable support from other areas. But based on their application and what they're proposing to do, they do meet the test.
Thank you.
Councillor Wells.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Mr. Chair, just a question. On that South Coast Cultural Society, last year we had an application in from South Coast Jazz. Is that the same organization, only it is now called South Coast Cultural Society?
Through the chair, that's a good question, Councillor Wells. That is in fact their nonprofit fundraising arm that has made applications, so they are considered eligible. So that is before you. But again, you may wish to critique these amounts further, but again, they are being recommended to you.
Thank you very much. And the only reason I was asking is to make sure, because last year she thought we missed her, but if this is the same group, I'm happy.
Oliver, please.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. My question, Chris, is on the Capital Performance Group. That is the group that's operating out of one of the downtown Simcoe storefronts, if I remember correctly?
Yes, that is correct,
Yeah,
Councillor
okay.
Oliver.
Good. Glad to see they've applied.
Are you done, Jim?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry,
Oh,
yes, that's
okay,
it.
turn your light off, then I'll know you're done.
I sure will.
Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Chairman, I cannot support the recommendation as printed. I know it's not on the floor yet, but to remove the Houghton Ag Society and the Delhi Fall Fest and the North Walsingham Ag Society and Long Point Country Bay Fest and the Donnybrook Fair, that's all done by volunteers, and it's gonna rip the heart out of those people, those volunteers behind that. So I can't support taking out the ones that have been grandparented. I think they should definitely stay in. And in the end, I know there's a committee set up. It's the mayor and councilors' budget that this is coming from. I think the ultimate decision should come from councilors on the decision-making as to what stays in and what doesn't. So that's my 2 cents for now.
Mr. Chairman, if I could respond. Councillor Columbus, what we were suggesting, you're absolutely right. These are very worthy organizations, long history. All we're simply suggesting in that recommendation is they, along with any other group, these don't have to make an application. It's a 5-page application. It's very straightforward. These groups automatically get a check in the mail. And what we're hoping to do, as many of these groups turn over, they have different leaders and organizing groups, they all of a sudden look in their mail in February and go, what's this check from? We didn't apply. So they may want to ask for more depending on the nature of the event, and that may be most worthwhile. So that was just a suggestion. You're absolutely right. You can amend that recommendation as you've suggested, but we do put that forward. We would like everybody to apply. It is very straightforward, and we can answer any questions and help them out, but make everybody consistent.
Okay, Councillor Columbus? Okay. Councillor Brunton.
I want to go back to this South Coast Cultural Society, and we've had them here every year. And when you read down in the page 225, it says funding towards presentation 2018 South Coast Jazz Event. Well, you say this is the nonprofit, but they have a profit too. So how do they get into nonprofit? Can you explain that to me?
From what we understand through the chair, they do have a nonprofit wing that does applications for fundraising. I can't speak in general terms, but some companies do have a not-for-profit wing that does fundraising like that. The intent here is for marketing and promotion, which is an eligible funding request. It's not to pay people, or it's not for profit to take away from the event. So again, from an eligibility requirement, they do meet the test, but you certainly raise a good question. It is, I know the proponents for that group are hoping to make it very sustainable and very profitable, and all the power to them.
Well, I see where they applied for $25,000 to start off with. It'd be interesting to see their application.
Mr. Chair, we did, obviously, we want to try to get as many groups as possible, provide funding and not wipe it out, at the knees. So we did make that recommendation, or the committee did, that 5,000 would be the upset maximum regardless of the amount that was being requested. So they did receive the maximum that is suggested. But again, that can be adjusted if you wish.
Is that it, Doug? Okay. Mayor Luke.
Could we get the story on Bayfest?
Doug? Mike.
Requested 5.
Certainly, through the chair, Bayfest is one of the grandparented organizations. You'll see them listed up in the very, I think it's about the 5th or 6th one down, Long Point Country Bayfest. They automatically received $2,000. They made an additional request for a further $5,000, and it was the committee's recommendation that the $2,000 would suffice for now. But that was actually one of the reasons why the committee recommended, if they were to make application for the full amount, perhaps 5,000 or 7, whatever, if they would just provide that justification in their application, it might be worthy of support for a larger amount. But again, this is a recommendation. They will still receive the same funding as they have historically, but we've recommended that additional 5 would not be supported.
I guess, Mr. Chair, my question should be, what was the original $5,000 request for?
It was for the festival. Not a lot of detail, just to help fund that event.
Mr. Chair, without any information in front of us, it's hard for me to say, sitting here, well, this group should have got more, they should have got less. No, we can get into that we have the right to do that. I often look at these and I look at, you have something like a Bay Festival in that community, or any community has a festival. I look at how many people benefit from that event. Some of these things, there is a narrow group that attend, support, or it's for. I would think the more widespread that our residents are served by this money, I would think that's a pretty important thing. And again, I guess the answer I got was simply that Bayfest really would like to increase the funding that they get from the county from 2,000 last year to 7,000 this year. Thank you, Mr. Baird.
Councillor Geisens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to make a motion, and the recommendation that's here, I'll read it, and we'll go from there. That report, DSC 17-87, 2018, municipal grants be received as information. That Tourism and Economic Development Advisory Board recommends that Norfolk County Council approve grant allocations for the 2018 budget as outlined within this report, and that the grants recipients be required to acknowledge the contribution from the municipality by adding Norfolk County logo to promotions, signage, and advertisement end there, and I'm taking out the bottom part of that. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Geisens has moved and Councillor Columbus has seconded that the bottom paragraph be removed, which reads, and further that the Tourism and Economic Development Advisory Board recommends that Norfolk County Council revise policy MC-05, County Grant Policy, to remove and end the policy of grandparenting funding for organizations, with the exception of the high school bursaries, in order to encourage transparency, flexibility, and due diligence effective for future grant intakes. Questions or comments from the rest of council? Councillor Black.
So these groups, the grandfathered, or it's grandparented now, so we've changed that terminology, is it? Grandmothered, grandfathered. So if we leave it the way it is, these groups could still apply for more funding if they wanted it, right? If they needed more than what the grandparenting is.
Through the chair, yes, absolutely. And notwithstanding that the Port Rowan Bayfest did, and the recommendation was that there was not additional funding, I think it's the responsibility of the applicants to provide lots of justification why they need that extra money, not just simply apply to hope to get more. You need to justify it, and council needs to know what they're supporting and why.
Okay, thank you.
Anyone else? Okay, you've heard the motion from Councillor Geisens. All those in favor of that motion? That is carried. Thank you. On to page 231. Report number DCS 17-90, Norfolk County Lakeshore Safety Strategy, provincial comments. Mr. Baird?
Thanks, Mr. Chairman. This is a follow-up. You may recall back before your summer break this year, staff had made a real effort to get some draft policy before you with respects to, we could use the term long point, turkey point egress. So it involved input from Mr. Cridland, Ms. Robinson's department, as well as planning and the Conservation Authority. And this was all to help the Conservation Authority deal with a number of development applications that were coming forward. So we did recognize the need to develop policy and perhaps an emergency response plan in the event of a high water flood event along the lakeshore. So Council did approve that, and it was further endorsed by the Conservation Authority. It was sent on, as we do for all official plan amendments, to the province. We received the comments, which have been identified as in the attachment from Ms. Elder. And the feedback essentially is nice try, not to be facetious, but they do recognize that we made a genuine effort to identify the hazards along the lakeshore, and that we have put forward a good plan for public communication, for dealing with infrastructure and flooding, but we still have to do a bit more work in terms of developing a policy that will meet the test. So again, this is just before you for information. The recommendation that we're asking Council to continue to direct staff to develop their final lakeshore safety strategy, our emergency response plan, which we would do as part of our emergency operations group, and then keep working towards that section 3.8.3 of the county official plan related to safety and egress. So we do plan to make another good push towards that with staff after the official plan is approved next year, and we'll keep up the hard work, and we'll bring back reports and recommendations to you at that time. So I'd be glad to answer any questions.
Thank you. Mayor Luke, please.
Well, I certainly support continuation of this. I'd like to move the recommendation to staff to continue. What else? What else can we do? That's what we should be doing.
Right. Could I have a
And
seconder?
I don't know, Mr. Chair, if I'm okay, I'm sorry. You need a seconder.
Could I have a seconder? Oliver?
Quick comment, if I may.
Yes.
I'm not sure where MNA is going here. I don't know how you even straighten that bunch out. To even think we're doing this not for safety reasons, but for development down there is ridiculous. Thank you.
Okay. We have a motion. Speaking to it, Councillor Height.
I do have some questions, if I'm able, Mr.
Go ahead.
Chair. Okay, thank you. Through you to Mr. Baird. Like, honestly, I couldn't believe it when I read this report. I don't know what to do anymore. We have planning staff, we have a conservation authority, but like, we can't get there from here for some reason. Personally, I wish we could just hire somebody who could help us with our problems, because we don't have those people in place right now. And it is so frustrating. This has been called on since 1989 and was never dealt with. We start to deal with it, and now MMA says it's not good enough for them. Frustrating? Super frustrating, Mr. Chair. Like, holy, my back's getting a bit sore here, and I'm getting no help from our staff or from the Conservation Authority other than we implement a plan. Now, a lot of the members of the board will know that to fix this problem, we need to raise the road. 1.3 meters. So is Public Works going to bring that to us when they redo the causeway? That's a question to Public Works. Will you be resolving that problem by raising the road 1.3 meters when the causeway is rebuilt? Because that's what it's going to take.
Through the chairman to council, as it currently stands right now, the Class CA isn't complete, but that is one of the things that has been considered through the Class CA, so I cannot give you a definitive answer because the Class CA isn't, but it has been brought to the attention, so it is something that's considered as part of the class environmental assessment process.
Okay, so that's for Long Point. How will Turkey Point be addressed other than we're going to build a whole bunch of grid walls, basically, where our roads were and flood out every cottage? By raising the road, how are we going to deal with that?
Through the chairman to council, I'm not sure how to answer that with respect to Turkey Point in terms of if the roads need to be raised, there isn't any room to raise those roads.
I know, but that's what the Lakeshore Management Plan calls for. So I don't know where we go from here, how we resolve this problem. Sure, we've enacted the emergency plan, and it's still not good enough. Like, I don't know what to do. Mr. Baird, when I read this, and obviously the safe access and egress, it appears 2 out of the 3 bullet points. And it also says here that MMA agrees with planning staff that there should be very limited new development in Long Point and Turkey Point. Who was in planning that sent that information, and shouldn't council have gotten a copy of that? Because I'm just looking to resolve some of my problems here, not have compounded problems by staff going to agencies and then coming back. We don't want the hearings anymore. We're trying to resolve them at the CA.
Would you like a comment or response, Councillor?
I would. Like, what type of response is staff sending to Mr. Stubbs here?
Well, first of all, through the chair, staff are not sending comments like that to ministry staff. What they're saying is, we know there's a finite number of lots in Long Point and Turkey Point. So it's not like there's a whole new subdivision or development. We're not adding to it. What we're simply doing, and what the CA is doing, and what this council is doing, is endorsing redevelopment and development of existing cottages. Could be, we talked about cottage height, cottage massing, overall scale, and that's what the ministry has some concerns with. The bigger the cottage, the more people it can accommodate. The potential is there to now have more people in those locations where there, if there is an emergency or a hazard response, there's more people to deal with. What the ministry is saying is, in order for them to support, or perhaps looking at maybe more leniency, is more studies, more work. The second bullet on page 234 of the email from Mr. Stubbs from MMA talks about the need for flood velocities and the information on flooding form. There was an application that was made about a year ago in partnership with the CA for some funding through the federal government. We didn't end up getting the approval to do that, but I think what they're suggesting is to do some new studies that may help justify the development that I think the Conservation Authority is hoping to be able to approve. We don't have that now, but that might open the door. If we know a little bit more of the science, we may be able to support more development. But at the present time, in the absence of that, we have what we have. I think they applaud us for at least coming up with an emergency response plan, mass communications, here's how we're going to handle things, reporting, communications, infrastructure improvements. That's all great, but it doesn't pave the way for more and larger development down there at this present time.
Okay, so the second bullet point you spoke on, the inner bay, the flood velocities, Long Point, who will be undertaking that? Is that's a CA function?
Through the chair, yes, absolutely. It's a CA function. It can also gain strength with endorsement from this council and others that are in the watershed. I think that would be a good message for those council members that represent Norfolk to speak with Mr. Evanitsky, their general manager, and see what opportunities there might exist to get funding to do some of these studies. Perhaps Turkey Point is not as critical as Long Point because we know it's more susceptible because of the only one way in and out on the causeway, whereas Turkey Point is essentially on the land. It's just a matter of going up one of 2 routes. So I think there needs to be more discussion in the months ahead, and maybe there's a new approach that we can take there.
Well, I can't speak for all the Norfolk County guys sitting on the board of the CA, but I can tell you Councillor Haidt is seriously frustrated that we're just stumbling and fumbling along here. We don't have a plan to address it properly and see it completely through. We stumble across something, we move to that position. We do that, oh, that's not good enough. It comes back, and off we go again. We're bouncing around. What a waste of time this entire exercise has been. Should we just knew from the start what's required of us? It's impossible for us to keep guessing. All we need is a solution and a plan and get to it and get on with it. This is such a huge waste of time. And then having to deal with letters like this, yet in the offer no solutions? Boy, I don't know what it takes to fix this problem, but I don't know where else I can keep turning. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Black.
Well, it's abundantly obvious to me that the upper levels of government are saying this isn't a safe place to develop. So, but the CIA's focus was to do a plan to allow development. Well, it's not safe. That's what they're saying. So I can understand why anybody would be frustrated if they try to develop an unsafe place. So what the plan is for is to allow the existing people that are there already to get out. That's what the plan's for. And certainly I wouldn't be prepared to be spending millions of dollars on some sort of access plan, exit plan for people there. They decided they know where they are, where they bought, and that there's a lake there, so that's up to them. Not everybody else to fix that problem. And Mr. Baird is right, and I keep saying it myself. You keep allowing cottages to go up, means more people, means it's more unsafe.
Thank you. Councillor Oliver, please.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I take quite a different tack than my colleague down the table does. Exercise, I lay a considerable amount of criticism at the feet of the ministry. I'm very disappointed in their letter. It's not helpful, in my opinion. I stand behind the plan that we produced and submitted last summer. There was a lot of effort put into it. We as council reviewed it, we endorsed it. And I personally feel it was a good plan to deal with the hazards that are down there. Safe access and egress is part of any logical emergency response plan. Full stop, that's part of it. And we addressed that. I was very struck by their last bullet, Mr. Chair, in their letter, where it says, your plan, well, it says there should be very limited development along Point and Turkey Point due to a number of factors, including but not limited to safe access, level of servicing, hazard lands, and natural heritage features. We all agree with that. There's no more land to be developed. So I'm not sure what action. I'm appreciative of the fact that staff are suggesting they'll continue to work on a final version, I guess, a final lakeshore safety strategy. But I think we've come a long way. I'm not happy with their response, with their comments. I think it is not particularly helpful whatsoever. And we just continue to do the best that we can, and that's it. And then it's going to be up to the province to either say, we accept what you're doing, or we somehow know better and we'll tell you what you've got to be doing. But I stand behind the document that was submitted back in the summertime.
Okay, Councillor Brunton.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Chairman. There's a beat around the bush here. Let's face it, the province want to shut those places down if they have a chance. That's their attitude. And I think they look at everything in Turkey Point, Long Point as Hastings Drive material, and that's my attitude towards them. And I'm hoping, and I asked Mr. Baird there last week, that with the abolishment of the OMB and this new, what's it called, Planning Appeals Tribunal is going to be the new wording, I believe. And they said, at least the document I referred to, said that all the policies within the provincial policy statement were not considered in the review. Do you remember we read that? So maybe, just maybe, we keep on fighting, I guess, and hope that down the line we get to do something somewhere down there. I took a drive on Sunday down to Turkey Point at least, and there's a lot of new activity with the existing cottages. And there is not a lot of new ones, but there are a few where the old marine, and Bonnie's Marina there, it's being redeveloped, and looks great, looks great. I think it's, but, I'm hoping, and again I'll say I'm hoping, that maybe down the line we may have a change in some of the policies that allow us at least to do something in some of these areas. So keep your fingers crossed. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Columbus.
Mr. Chairman, I too am frustrated about this situation, but you would think that being that the province has one of the largest and busiest campgrounds in Long Point in the province, that they would get on side and help us resolve this safe ingress and egress issue. I forget how many thousands of people visit that campground in the summertime, but it's probably one of the busiest in the province. So it's unfortunate that Municipal Affairs maybe isn't even communicating with the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry, who operates that under Parks Ontario.
Anyone else? Councillor Oliver?
Again, Mr. Chairman, it just catches my eye here now. On that third bullet, and listen to this statement that they're making. MMA is concerned that this report, as it currently is presented, may suggest that there is safe access and thus allow for a greater level of development in Long Point and Turkey Point. I defy you to show me where in that report it says that. If that's their summation, that's their assumption, don't lay that on our emergency response, or whatever it is, emergency strategy for Long Point. I mean, that's patently inappropriate for them to put words in our mouth and in our report, and that's exactly what they've done there.
Okay, what's your, Councillor Columbus?
Last thing, I think it's probably time that MMA came and spoke to us at the podium here to discuss these issues. I see the county manager nodding his head yes.
Well, that's another item. Okay, what are we going to do with this? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, long time ago. Luke moved and Oliver seconded. All those in favor? Opposed? That is carried. Thank you. Let's go to page 235. Public Works 17-87, right-of-way retaining wall, Wolden Street, Port Rowan. Ms. Robinson.
Through the Chairman to Council, before you is the report with respect to the retaining wall at 27 Wolven Street in Port Rowan. Council will recall that a deputation came forward and the resolution is included in the report, and we were directed to install one row of block retaining wall to level it out. At the end of the day, when we went out and attempted to implement this, it was going to result in some serious complications with respect to having to have a railing, and we're asking for different directions so that we can actually remove some of them so that it'll be a consistent height all the way across the front, and we will not require a guard or a rail at the top, and I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Councillor Height, I'm sure has a couple.
Yeah, I'm sure I do, Mr. Chair. Through you to Lee. Lee, when was the date that we did this, resolution number 7? I don't see a date in this report.
I was surprised myself not to see the date. It was just over a year ago, so this didn't need to be reconsidered because we did look that up.
1 year, because really we just asked to go out there and fix this lady's problem, right, by adding some blocks. And hear me out, because it's in the resolution that staff review the building code relative to the guard requirements. So now the guard requirements come back and it says, and further that if at the modified retaining wall height a guard is not required under the Ontario Building Code, that one not be installed. That's good. I hope we're not randomly under requirements and installing stuff.
Through the Chairman to Council, the homeowner has indicated that they would like one. So we asked to have this written very carefully so that at the end of the day, it's very clear that Council does not intend to have a guard be installed at the top of that retaining wall.
Okay, because that wasn't the impression that I got when the deputation came here that didn't want the guard installed. When she was here and spoke to this matter.
She does not wish to have a guard installed.
No, she never has.
Correct. But with the resolution, the way the resolution currently stands, not the one proposed tonight, the other one, if we add this other row of retaining wall, we're going to end up with a guard at the top of the retaining wall, which she doesn't wish to have.
Right. But have you personally gone out to that site?
Yes, I have.
Really?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to move the recommendation, Mr. Chair. It's been a year to get 10 blocks laid or 10 blocks removed. We're just looking for a solution here. I'll
Okay.
move this recommendation.
Okay. Seconder, anybody?